We're going to make a couple of boxes and we're going to look at the relations and the dimensions in this video. So if I go into line and click on the front plane and I just draw a line, then my apply the dimension is turned on, and we'll need to take a look at where that is in the options. All right, so on the very top is the sketch. No. There we go. Enable on-screen numeric input on entity creation, but only create the dimension if the value is entered. All right, so since I did not enter a value, it gets kicked off, and then I can come over here to the sketch numeric input and turn it off. All right, so I want that off temporarily because we are going to take a look at this this line geometry, and right now it has no relations applied to it. It's able to rubber band, rotate. Each of our objects is going to have several entities associated with it. In the case of the line, we have an endpoint, we have the line segment, and we have an endpoint. When I pick those, we're going to see the control vertex parameters. When I click on the line, you'll see the length and the angle, and I can put values into those. But the problem is it does not provide the sketch to go fully defined. So we can enter value in all of these depending on what we have, but it's really not doing us any good to come back out into the work area and go, oh, it can still drag. All right, so all that work to enter those values can be lost pretty quick. So as we're moving around, we need to start looking for the inference lines. So little blue dashed lines are going to pop up as we get close and are moving around on the screen. I'm going to say the one rule that we always have to observe is that some object will be will be dimensioned related to the origin. So as I move that close, it'll do a little snap, and it will go from being a relation with a white background to a yellow background. And then the relation will pop up, and I'm going to zoom up on that real quick. All right, so the relation is going to coincident. The endpoint and the origin are coincident, and that means that I've basically placed it to where this line will stretch and shrink and move all the way around, but it's not going to, that endpoint's not going to move off of the origin. And so as I drag this, you're going to see that we get a little horizontal, and that is in a white background, so it's not going to automatically apply the horizontal. And when we rotate up to vertical, horizontal, and vertical, those are not being applied. We're just putting it into position. All right, and I still have the endpoint, so when I click on the line, I'm either going to see the horizontal, vertical. Let's see if I can locate it. So a single click and a pause is going to give you the pop-up, and you're going to be able to see the make horizontal, make vertical. So even though this is in the horizontal position, if I want it to be vertical, I can click on vertical, and we'll go ahead and apply the horizontal this time. And now when I drag, I'm able to drag this back and forth on the other side, but it's not going to rotate, and it's going to stay in that position. So when we go to apply the dimension without the numeric input, well, the numeric input is basically when you're inputting the geometry, so we would have seen that earlier. So in this case, I'm going to select the object, and I'm always going to try to select the object first, and then we'll talk about the hierarchy of our dimensions. And in the modify box, we have the accept, the restore and exit, the rebuild, reverse the sense. This will temporarily change this to a negative value and send it the other way. And then the spin box increments, which affects how much the little up and down move. And then the mark dimension to be imported into drawing. Okay, and then if we do the little spin radio button down here, it will adjust our number. When I hit a value, then it will apply, and when I double click on it, it takes me back into the modified. The one that I jumped over was the address, and we can give this a name, and eventually you will click in there and you'll start typing and it'll say, do you want to add this global variable? And typically the answer is no. Let me back out of that, and I'll worry about the address or the variable later on. All right, so those are all looking pretty good. Let's go with, I went back, so I'm right clicking and looking for the select. Since I'm already in select, I lost that part of the menu. It's only going to be active when it's available. And I'm going to turn on the sketch numeric input so that we can go back into line. And I'm looking for that coincident again, but this is a slightly different symbol, and for whatever reason the endpoints are concentric. And the confusing part, or the weird part, is that it will still apply a coincident. So I'm doing click drag, and I'm still holding down the left mouse button. So if I want this to be 30 millimeters and enter, as soon as I hit enter, it's ready to go. And if we go click, click, I can click on the start and drag it out. And the importance of turning on that create the dimension only if the value is entered is I've got my inference lines. I can see that this is going to apply a horizontal relation, and I'm about the same length as the lower line. So when I click, I'm in a continuous mode, then I can bring it over and click again. As soon as I do that, we'll right click and select to get out of it. Nothing moves accidentally. If I grab onto it and try to drag it, it's all going to stay in position. If I want to reposition my dimensions, then we can move those into place. All right, so let's say I get rid of my 2 dimensions. I just highlighted each of those and hit delete on the keyboard. Now we're back into a situation where this will drag, it will change directions, it will move according to the relations. All right, so the little green boxes, I think I turned that off, so yep, there we go. So if the sketch relations are on in the view, then you're going to be able to see all the relations. And 5 relations are not too bad, but when you get into a little more complex sketch and there's 10, 15, 20 relations going on, and then it's going to be time to turn those little green boxes off. And so that is the view sketch relations. Once it's turned off, then we can go back and we'll start to apply our dimensions again. So we did, in the setting our first lines, we did the numeric input, which set a linear dimension. If I go over to Smart Dimension and do the pull down, you're going to have all these other choices. But the thing about the Smart Dimension is that it's going to respond basically to what you pick. So if we do the first one and I place it, then it gives me a value. But I want to reuse that one, so I'm going to do Control Z on the keyboard. Maybe Control Z. And now for the example, Smart Dimension or right click and Smart Dimension. The second in my choices is to go object to object. And then we get the same result, but it's a lot easier and maybe a bigger target to pick for just the one object. And if I put the 30 in there, then it's going to adjust and accordingly. All right, and then the last is, well, we could do object to point and point to point. And each of these has the advantages. And I do want to illustrate again the points. So when I'm applying the Smart Dimension, I just put in 2 points. When I apply the Smart Dimension going between points, I can have a linear distance, I can have a horizontal distance, and I can have a vertical distance. So if I do this as a linear distance, which is what we're going to end up with most of the time. And then we get out of that by right-clicking and select. This can not only rotate, but it can orbit. So I think the points are the least stable. And I know that coming over from AutoCAD or from other design packages, you're going to have habits that if something strange goes on, that's probably going to be one of the causes. All right, so let's go ahead and stop the video, and we'll pick up from here.